Alright, so as we're heading into the final stretch of the season, or this month of October, really, the Halloween season, I guess, I decided that we could go back to a couple of these we've talked about before on the channel, but that was forever ago, and opinions may change, and, but for the most part, especially with the original movie, maybe not so much, because I've always loved the original movie especially, but yes, as you can see, we're going to talk about one of the, I guess you could say, pioneering slasher movies. I know they go as far back as the '60s, but as far as slasher movies, the way we kind of know them now, one movie in particular here really made a lot of ground and made a lot of foundation for what the slasher genre would eventually build on, and a lot of stuff that we'll kind of see used over and over again throughout the decades, even up to now, the present day. Comes back to this 1974 movie, and naturally it spawned a couple of remakes. Because that's what if you don't spawn a million sequels and remakes, you at least spawn a remake or two, like Black Christmas has done with 2006 and 2019. But I guess you could say remake is used pretty loosely for both of these. It does kind of feel like three completely different movies. It does have a lot more. 2006 has a lot more in common with 74 than 2019 does, but we'll kind of touch on all three here. I've tried to organize these thoughts as much as I possibly could, so I figure we can break this up a little bit and bounce around between the three of them and talk about why. To be real with you, just right up front, what it's basically going to be is how perfect, nearly perfect, the 1974 movie is, and how 2006 and 2019 decided to switch things up a little bit, and if that was for the better or not. And I guess a spoiler alert would be that it's pretty much always not, but maybe the two remakes still have something to offer. That's what we're going to explore also. So, to start out with the openings between them, like I said, there may be a lot of me repeating something I said in the video where we talked about the original movie, but that was like 7 years ago, so God knows what I even said. But to talk about the openings of all three of them, starting with 74, that opening shot immediately sets us up for a couple of different things. And I love it for both reasons, where we see the sort of lurking outside of the house, and the first shot is relatively steady, and we're just kind of looking through the windows a little bit, and I feel like you can take that as a, like if you were going into it the first time, you would think, oh, it's like this really cool, it kind of gives us this vibe of what it would be like from the killer's point of view, being on the outside. And then it immediately cuts to the actual point of view of the killer, which is obviously much more shaky and much more has the first person kind of look. So, I love the way that they kind of took both approaches to that, or at least that's what it feels like. And what I also love about this is that when we get that point of view shot, typically the reveal would be that it's a fake out. That it's like, oh, it builds up like it's going to be some really threatening character, and then it's just, some random person. And it's in this sort of fake out to the audience. But the thing about the 74 movie is that it's very, very scarce on fake outs, sort of period. Like when you look at it, there's maybe one thing you might be able to consider a fake out in the 74 movie as far as I can remember, and that is the moment when, it's a very good moment in the movie actually, when they're in like the kitchen or somewhere and somebody pops up in the window and it ends up being, two guys that are part of the search party. But the way that happens, where there's no, like, sound effect, there's no score or anything like that, and it's right before we cut to something else, like, right before it cuts, somebody just kind of very silently pops up in the window, just really briefly. And it's, like, actually startling in that sense, because it feels very, like, you're actually, like a jump scare if you were actually there in the room, is what it is, which is fantastic. That's the only thing I can remember as far as fake-outs in the original movie, unless I'm missing maybe one. But another great thing about it is that it doesn't really have one of the slasher movie staples, which is the opening kill, could be seen as something really obvious and really expected by this point. So maybe you could say Claire is the opening kill, even though it's like 15 minutes in. But since we're kind of in the setting with the main characters already, I don't really consider Claire an opening kill. 'Cause it's literally just the movie starting, and like I said, there's no fake outs or anything like that. It's just we start with the killer's point of view. The killer gets in the house and kills somebody, and that's the entire first 15 minutes of a movie. That's like an hour and a half. So that's just like I said. That's just the movie starting. Like that's not a particular trope or particular isolated scene or anything like that. Um, to take that into account, the 2006 movie has an opening kill and a fake out in the first 3 minutes. Where we have the opening kill with, once again, named Claire, and then we have the Santa fake out, where I don't know if they're thinking they were pulling some Silent Night, Deadly Night thing, like some callback to that, where it's like, oh, Santa's threatening for some reason, even though this movie never establishes that. No, just a little fake out to start the movie 3 minutes in, even though we've already had an opening kill, like, right before this. But the thing that's also kind of weird is the opening kill even happens the way that it does in the 2006 movie because the 2006 movie's timeline is all scrambled for some reason. But we'll get more into that. As far as the 2019 movie having like an opening kill, there is the first kill right before they show the title that's really well done. With the sort of snow angel death. But that's another one where we'll kind of touch on it a little bit, but it's an opening kill that works, even if it is kind of sort of establishing the cliche. But right before that, they too had the sort of fake out. But once again, also, I feel like it's a fake out that works, especially with what the 2019 movie is going for as far as the social commentary, which we'll definitely get more into. But the idea that Lindsay, I think her name is, she's walking home, and then there's a dude that looks threatening behind her, which is just a general thing, as far as, women walking home alone at night, and there's a dude that's needlessly close, following right behind, and that just kind of being a general fear, and then adding that into the fact that, oh, this is also potentially a slasher movie, and there's this threat, and then it turns out that guy is not a threat, and then the threat's like right in front of her. So, yeah, I like the fact that you go back to the original movie, and the fake-outs and stuff just aren't there. Like, it's interesting how much it pioneered the slasher genre, but how much of the tropes and the cliches sort of came after the fact, when people were already using this movie as a jumping-off point. And then those tropes and cliches eventually found their ways into Black Christmas through their remakes, rather than the original movie itself. So, and I'm kind of afraid that's one reason. Like, I'm almost afraid that these other two movies potentially have hurt the reputation of the first movie, because if people have seen these but haven't seen the original, they're probably just going to assume the original is just your sort of, well, I would say garden variety slasher movie. That's kind of what it was accused of being already when it first came out. But like I said, little did they realize how much Black Christmas is actually starting the original movie. So it's definitely something where I feel like surely it was always considered good in certain circles, certainly in horror circles, I imagine. But it's also definitely, retrospect has really helped it so much, and really given it this sort of staying power in it when you come back and realize what all it's responsible for in a good way. So, with that now, we can go into the kills, I guess, because all three of these, I guess you could say, take different approaches to their kills. And I feel like the 2019 movie is interesting because you could say that it's kind of trying to go with the flow that the original movie started, which was being pretty brutal and having pretty brutal kills in it, but not really showing much of anything. But the big difference is, in the original movie, the kills are really memorable. Like, I imagine everybody who's seen the movie remembers Claire getting smothered, first, and then being up in the attic the whole movie. And they remember the house mother being pulled up into the attic by the hook, and that's all we really see. And Barb's death with the unicorn is obviously extremely memorable, but the only real blood that we see is on her hand, and we see the killer like sort of stabbing down. But it's an extremely memorable scene just by the way it's like shot and the way it's executed. Um, as far as the 2019 movie kind of trying to take that approach of not really showing anything, I already talked about the opening kill, the snow angel kill, which is really memorable. And the thing about that is they could have continued to take that approach. Sofia Takal, who's the director, who kind of came over from indie territory. She's from like the Joe Swanberg circle. So an interesting choice to take this on. But you can see a visual flair in this opening, particularly with that kill. So it's kind of even more baffling when you see that kill in the opening scene that the other kills are... And like as we talked about with the original movie, the problem isn't that they're off screen. The problem is that they feel like incomplete scenes. Like I want to say I actually heard that the movie was cut down for the PG-13 rating, and that's like the kills initially were more gruesome, but they were literally cut out. So when I say the scenes feel incomplete, that there's a good chance that that's literal. And so we just see, like, you know, a hooded figure appear, and then the scene will just end. And then by the time we get to the end, we don't really know who's alive and who's dead, because the kill scenes, or maybe not kill scenes, are on the cutting room floor somewhere. So that's... And for a movie that's, you know, coming from a slasher territory, that's... It's a weird choice. Like, I don't even think the PG-13 matters that much. Like, I feel like you could execute the kills the way they're done in the original movie and get a PG-13 because they don't really show anything, but they were done in such a memorable style that they stuck. And that's not what's going on here. 2006 movie... obviously is on the complete other side of this in being loaded with gore, overloaded with gore, I would say. And yeah, it was 2006, so we were in the torture porn era by now. We were post Saw, we were post Hostel, I believe, as well. Or we were right in that territory. So yeah, they went all in on the gore here. The eyes being pulled out, the stabbings up close, the blood with chunks in it flying everywhere. And I get it. We've talked before about how there is an artistry to gore and how it's shown on screen, because somebody has to create that in order for it to show up on screen and gross you out and look real, or at least over the top, but in enough way that it's a fun sort of gross out if it's done right. But yeah, I think the problem, this kind of brings us, talking about the gore in 2006 movie, kind of brings us to the overall problem of the sixth movie. One of the big problems of this one is that I feel like this one's really trying too hard in pretty much every aspect, because not only is it like trying to be real super gory and memorably gory and stuff like that, it has that over the 2019 movie, is the kills are memorable. It has that going for it, but pleasantly memorable, I can't really say. Because it's, and like I said, yeah, you can appreciate the artistry of gore, but it's not even just the gore. It's, you know, the whole... the attic scene, where Agnes is conceived and stuff like that, and like you can just tell they were trying so hard to be as disturbing as possible that it actually goes past disturbing, and you just kind of roll your eyes at it. It's like it's when you think about like what people find really edgy when they're like 14 and 15. That's kind of, it feels like that was the target audience for this movie, if not, you know, the screenwriters for this movie. And that, I don't know. And there's all, and like I said, the whole cookie cutter thing, where it's like, it feels like something a morbid teenager would come up with, who was desperately trying to disturb his friends, and the friends would just, instead of the friends being, really, sucked in with it and, like, whatever, they're just like, oh, I get what he's trying, and I kind of don't want to hang out with this kid anymore. Not even because I think he's genuinely this disturbed, but just because he's kind of lame because he's trying so hard. That's what this movie feels like. Feels like the kid that's never coming over to the sleepover again, but not for the reasons he thinks. That's... I don't know. And it's also one of those ones where they're constantly building up Billy the killer by having characters talk about how he's so psycho, and look how psycho he is, listen to how psycho he is. And that's... They're just really, really laying it on thick and really, really telling us how to feel about everything. It's also probably trying a little too hard to be cool. There's, there obviously, the line "Merry Christmas, motherfucker" is gonna come into it, thinking it's super badass. They actually thought that was so badass that the line is in the movie towards the end. But if I remember correctly, they also had Michelle Trachtenberg say it in the trailer, even though that scene's not in this. So they were really banking on "Merry Christmas, motherfucker" being in... Basically what they're trying to say is, oh, look, we're Christmassy and R-rated. Aren't we edgy and aren't we badass? It's yeah. You just kind of cringe at it now. You kind of cringe at a lot of, mid-2000s things, especially in horror. And this was, like, right in the thick of that, so that's unfortunate. But there was, and obviously talking about the Michelle Trachtenberg scene not even being in the movie, apparently there was a whole thing where, like, a lot of stuff for this movie was shot strictly for the trailer. Like to the point where they even hired an actress who's not even in the movie to do scenes for the trailer, which is hilarious that seemed to piss some people off, because if I remember correctly, it was the opposite problem for the 2019 movie, where when the 2019 movie came out and everybody was like, oh my god, the trailer just showed us everything. Like, just gave us everything, gave us the twist, everything. And so to think that people got pissed about that too, as well as being pissed about getting scenes that weren't even in the movie, so everything for, like, so much was fresh. I guess you gotta find a middle ground when it comes to trailers, but I don't know, because I haven't watched a trailer since, like, 2013, so... And it's a blissful experience, so... Yeah, I guess while we're on the topic of what's going on as the movie starts and is progressing, the way the phone calls are treated also, I guess it's not too different between the original movie and the 2006 movie, but what's interesting about the original movie is that audiences were still freshly recovering from The Exorcist. And so the calls kind of have that vibe when Regan's possessed and she's saying as many bad things to Jason Miller as she possibly can. It gives off that vibe, and what I actually love about that, though, is it doesn't feel like it's just for the sake of it. It kind of feels like not only is it just setting up, how hostile this caller is, especially towards women, these particular women, but it almost feels like all of that is a setup for one line, one specific delivery that really sets the tone, not just for us, the audience, but for the characters in it. The moment in the original movie when he's on the phone and he's saying, the fat pig stuff and all the stuff that's probably unmentionable here, particularly on YouTube, but then after all this, after these really, really detailed and specific words, he just says, "I'm gonna kill you," and hangs up. And it's like when he's insulting them and when he's using, these words against women really specifically, and then the fact that there's no specifics whatsoever to "I'm gonna kill you." It's just "I'm gonna kill you," and it's over. And it's like even the tone changes, and you can kind of see, like, Olivia Hussey's face, where, like, it gets really dark, where it's like, oh, this guy's just fucking around, or this guy's probably unwell and he's just making prank calls or whatever. And then the "I'm gonna kill you" is immediately like, I think he meant that. Wherever this guy is or whoever he is, I think we're in danger, just with one line and just with one change of tone. And so I love that. That's perfect. The 2006 movie is basically that without the impact, which is most of what's going on in the 2006 movie. Um, the 2019 movie, I guess it makes sense in a way. It switches to texting, but it's not really effective. Like we can see what they're texting, and it's like it's threatening, but not too forward in a way to where it's like that could believably be a text you would get in real life. A woman especially would get in real life that would be like, some vague threat to make women scared and paranoid or whatever. But I don't know if it's just in comparison to what's going on in the original movie or what, and just that one delivery of "I'm gonna kill you," because that's the thing in texting you can't do the change in tone. That's a big player in what happened in this sort of turning point in the original movie. So, yeah, like I said, the texts are believable, I guess, but from this kind of movie and from the perspective that the audience is coming from, is supposedly coming off these other two movies, the texts just aren't landing and not really giving that terrifying feel. Like I said, there might be twinges of realism enough to where it's like, oh, I can imagine getting text like that, or maybe some woman could say, I've gotten a text like that, and it brought back a feeling. But for the most part, I don't think it works in the same way at all. So there's that. I guess we're not like done or anything, but I do feel like it's hard to talk about these movies without trying to go around the ending. So let's just talk about the endings, because obviously it all stems from anything that's going to come after the original movie stems from how the original movie ends, because you don't really know how incredible the original Black Christmas is until it ends. And then when you have the perspective of that, you realize the genius of the movie. The fact that we never find out who the killer is. We never find out his motivation. We never find out who Billy or Agnes are. There's a heavy implication that Billy is the killer, but not a fucking thing is confirmed. Nothing at all. And that's amazing. The fact that they build up enough that it could be Keir Dullea, and then at the very last minute to say, actually, it's not. Roll credits, bye. It's like the way those. Oh my god! I would have loved to have seen this in like a fresh theater in 1974 when the credits started rolling, just to hear the commotion that must have happened. It had to have been glorious, and I love that. But speaking of the Keir Dullea thing, I also love the fact that not only is it unexpected that the movie ends without revealing the killer or a motive or anything at all, it's even more unexpected that we don't even get a false climax. A false climax would have been her having a whole physical confrontation with Keir Dullea, something that clearly happens off screen. Because he's walking towards her, we cut to the cops outside, we cut back in, he's dead. It happened off screen. And so, I imagine with that, 1974 audiences must have been expecting another climax. Because we didn't really get one. And then it's over. And that's fucking awesome, if you ask me. For a movie like this. And when you see the, slasher movie cliches as they went on, hardly any movie that's tried this has clearly not done it as well, because they're not as memorable. I can think of at least one movie that's tried, and it's a very pathetic movie. I think it's one of the lowest rated movies on IMDb, actually. But yes, you have to do it in some certain way, and they just hit a real sweet spot here. The writer, Roy Moore, and Bob Clark, the director, just really, really hit something, and made this ending so perfectly terrifying because you don't know jack shit. And so, keep that in mind now. And you look at what happened here with actually, let's start with the 2006 movie, because this is obviously the most egregious. So, I've read up on what Glenn Morgan, I believe, the director, the guy that did the Willard remake, which we've talked about by now, he was talking. When you see what he has said about it, you get a certain perspective that makes sense, where you can imagine what he thought this movie could have been. But I just feel like, just from the get go, the worst idea for. Because the thing about it is, what can you do with a remake of Black Christmas if you're not just going to do the exact same thing? So I understand from that perspective, especially in the 2006 perspective, where horror was not in a great place and people were just kind of doing whatever, um, that you would say, well, why don't we, you know, give the killer a backstory? Let's do that. Like, let's actually do the whole find out who the killer is, give him a motive, all that stuff. Um, the very next year, Rob Zombie would make his Halloween, where we got Michael's very underwhelming, obvious, what else was it gonna be backstory, so why even bother? And, we've already talked about how I feel like they were trying way too hard as far as the disturbing factor, but basically pretty much betraying what made the first movie's ending so great. And the thing about it also is, to my understanding, it was actually Bob Clark himself who said he thought it was a good idea to flesh out the killer. Which I just don't understand. Like I said, that's the power of the original. Like I said, you don't even know how good the original movie is until you reach that point. And that's the point that you want to completely betray and do the exact opposite of why that worked. And to make that, and that's not just like the movie starts with, it's not like a prologue explained who Billy was. Throughout the entire movie, we're getting flashbacks. It's like a whole focus. You could almost say it's half the movie, probably. And that, maybe I can compliment it for that commitment to it. Like, if it was, like, if they were going to give Billy a backstory, and it's just, like, one scene that's a prologue, I would have been like, well, that's pointless, you just ruined it. But the fact that they did make it a point to make it such a large chunk of the movie does feel like there's an idea there that doesn't suck. There's an idea there that doesn't completely betray what made the first movie's ending so iconic and so great. But I still just feel like from the get-go it's a bad idea. And to do it so poorly with the stuff that's trying way too hard to be really disturbing. I don't know. And the fact that that's basically the whole, it feels like it's the whole purpose of the 2006 movie. So that in itself feels like, not only is a portion of the movie betraying the movie's existence, but the movie's ending, but the whole movie's existence is like, well, the only thing we were gonna do that wasn't an exact remake was the backstory stuff. So that's just a whole. So I don't know. I just don't feel like the 2006 movie was a good idea, is what I'm trying to say. So now, if you want to talk about the 2019 movie, where I do like the idea that all three movies do take a different approach as far as us getting to our ending. Where in the first movie, there is no reveal, we never find out. In the second movie, there's no reveal because we know the whole time. The third movie does take the reveal approach that we typically know, where we don't know who the killer or killers are throughout the movie, and then there is a reveal towards the end as we go into the third act. Well, you could say you don't know who the killer or killers are, but it does feel like everything is pretty obvious. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the 2019 movie that they set up where it's like, I can't tell if you're intentionally giving away what's going on or not. I can't tell if you're intentionally showing your hand or not, because everything seems so obvious. Because we see that little secret meeting already that just seems like it's pointing all the fingers at it. We're doing the Hot Fuzz thing, where it's everybody in a cloak. Essentially. Every dude, essentially, in a cloak. And Cary Elwes is, like, comically suspicious through the whole movie. The thing where he's talking about, like, we want to keep our values, our whole background, everything, keep everything the way it is or whatever. And yeah, the reveal is basically that it's all of them. That's one thing. If the fact that it felt kind of obvious as it was going. But something that even the 2006 movie knew not to do was take the supernatural route. Because if there's one thing that's great about the slasher movies, it's that they feel like a break from your typical horror movie. Even though most people probably see the face of horror as the slasher genre, there's, monster movies, there's ghost movies, there's vampire movies, all that stuff. There's so many different things going on in horror, and many of them are played out to death. So when you see enough supernatural stuff, I always like coming back to the slasher movies because they're grounded, and they're simple, and so to take this movie that essentially helped pioneer the slasher genre in a big way, and you put the supernatural into it, it's... Like I said, there's already enough things in here that aren't working, and then to throw that in, and not just that, but it's a ridiculous way to put in supernatural elements. Like, it's not even just supernatural elements in general would have felt out of place and felt like we're kind of betraying the concept here of the slasher movie. But it's the way they do it with the black ooze and the alpha thing. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's how they do it. And then we have the big moment where all the women come back and there's the big fight and everything. And it feels like a big moment. It feels like a moment that should be really big and triumphant and awesome and badass. But number one, it just kind of generally doesn't feel earned, especially after we've just had the stupid reveal of the supernatural element and the black ooze or whatever the fuck. But secondly, like I was talking about before, most of these people were like, oh, so they didn't die. I couldn't tell because the movie wasn't really showing us what happened. So it was more confusing when they all appear. And it's like, oh, I kind of thought that person might come back. I don't remember. I thought that person was dead. I don't even know who that person is. I don't remember them, but apparently they were in there. Yeah, that's another problem. Is a lot of unmemorable characters. But speaking of the characters themselves, to talk about the casts of these, once again, I feel like this is a place where the first movie can't really be topped. There's one... Olivia Hussey really stands out. I was talking about her sort of facial expressions during the phone calls and how she makes this great sort of final girl. But there's also... I feel like Margot Kidder's really the standout of the original movie, where there's something about her where she's got this thing going on where she feels like she's kind of in charge. Like she feels like if these were the Mean Girls, she'd basically be their Regina George, is what it feels like. But she's also like really, she's got this seductive way about her and this playful way about her. But then there's the moments where she's like drunk, and we do start to kind of see this fragility sort of underneath this hard exterior. It feels like there's a lot going on with Barb, and a lot of that's coming from Margot Kidder's really great performance. That's the kind of performance you're not going to find in either one of the other two movies. But we also have the house mother. I like the character of the house mother, Mac, especially because she's that character where in any other movie she'd be like the stern character, but the way she almost kind of, she basically encourages the laid back atmosphere that's going on here, and the way that she has like her own affinity for alcohol and stuff like that just kind of makes her this fun, unexpected character, and unexpected in a way that we see this character on the outside and you would think you immediately know this character and what part she's going to play in this, and it's just not like that, which I really like. And Keir Dullea with his Malcolm McDowell makeover, looking way too old to be the character that he is, but, Art Hindle also, who's come up a lot lately. there's plenty of memorable characters here. John Saxon obviously was always great, and kind of playing a similar part here that he would 10 years later in Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, yeah. Even the cops, like Nash and all of them, just have these little memorable parts that are great. And I said memorable is just not really the word that comes to mind for the rest of what's going on here. I will say, what I do think is great, that I think I read the director said about the casting of the 2006 movie, is when you look at everybody in it, like you've got Katie Cassidy at the front, but if you're watching it, you kind of don't really know Katie Cassidy's at the front. Because you've got Michelle Trachtenberg, you've got Lacey Chabert, you got Mary Elizabeth Winstead. And the great thing about this that apparently the director was going for was that basically they all look like they could be a final girl. Like if you were to have 4 different versions of this movie, it would be very believable if like Lacey Chabert was the final girl of one, Michelle Trachtenberg the other, Mary Elizabeth Winstead the other, Katie Cassidy the other. And so to have them all here, you're never really quite sure who the final girl is gonna be, which I really like. Because some of the character names stick from the original movie, but some of them don't. So that's great. And to bring in Andrea Martin, who played Phil in the original movie, to play the house mother now is a really nice touch as well. So she was kind of a standout of the original movie as well. So yeah, that's fine. Even if the characters aren't memorable, that's fine. And Oliver Hudson being here is like, the sort of red herring, the sort of Keira Delay kind of character. It's fine. Just and it's to see what's going on in the 2019 movie. I would say we've got a memorable. We've got Imogen Poots is fine as the lead, especially with that sort of traumatized background and the way that kind of starts to play a part in the performance as it goes on. To where there's something angry in this performance, I feel like really helps make her the sort of good final girl, even though this is hardly a final girl scenario when it comes to the end, which is another decent way to throw it on its head a little bit, but yeah, to kind of put it in the character in that box, she fits great. And there's the character of Chris, who's like the sort of causing all of the disruption, as the male characters would probably call it. But other than that, there's not really. I guess another moment they tried to do in this one is with Fran. I think her name was, the girl with the glasses, where she's killed and then she's left out on the balcony and she's just sitting out there. I think that's their way of trying to recreate Claire being up in the attic for the whole time. And that's... Yeah, I guess to go into that also, talking about the settings here, where you go to the original and you talk about the fact that Claire's dead body's in the attic the whole movie, and that's one of the creepiest things maybe in horror history. Every time they cut to her up there, and we know how much time has passed, all the people that are looking for her, and nobody knows she's up there. The thing about it also is, we brought up Black Christmas when we talked about When a Stranger Calls last year. Because When a Stranger Calls gets a lot of credit for what Black Christmas did. I know it goes all the way back to the urban legend, but the calls are coming from inside the house thing. And there's a point in time I was talking about in When a Stranger Calls where it's revealed in the opening scene that the killer is upstairs and the children are dead upstairs. And the fact that Carol Kane has been in the house with all of this the whole time, not realizing right above her, makes that opening sequence of When a Stranger Calls terrifying because of what you've been trapped in the house with without knowing it. Is a whole... might as well be a whole subgenre of horror. And I like the way the setting... most of the original movie feels like it's kind of the interior setting, where there is this sort of trapped feeling where it's like, for most of the movie you can tell yourself, oh, Claire is dead in this building and she's right up there. And after a while, the house mother is in the same position, just up there rotting with nobody knowing, and the killer lurking around somewhere. So I like the fact that there's so much interior to the original movie. I feel like that helps a lot to kind of build the terror. the interior of the 2006 movie basically feels like a Gilmore Girls set, and that's I don't know. What I'm thinking about here when I give this criticism is the idea of the Christmas setting. Because, like I said, most of the original movie feels like it's interior, which sets up for what's going on. The 2006 movie is like everything does look super Christmassy, but in a very way you'd see in like a commercial. It's like or a show like Gilmore Girls or something. I haven't even watched Gilmore Girls. I just have a specific vision in my head of what like living rooms look like, and I feel like that's about what it is. Um, if there's one movie actually in this lineup of three that I feel like captures some sort of Christmas atmosphere that actually helps set the tone to kind of contrast what the horror is, um, 2019 movie actually feels like Christmas in a college town. I've been through a couple of college towns during Christmas, and when they actually get like really festive looking, is actually amazing. At least the places I've been. So to kind of capture that vibe, where it feels like this sort of, it's like half college town vibe and half small town vibe, and we see the characters walking around a lot, and I actually really like that as far as setting the atmosphere. And like I said, the contrast of the darkness that's happening in the rest of the story, and it's interesting that they could capture the Christmas side so well and not the horror side so well. Um, there is also stuff in the flashbacks of the 2006 movie where it's like this obviously very drab, depressing, dirty, grimy setting. But it's often like Christmas lights are bleeding into it, like the blue Christmas lights or the Christmas lights in his cell, even kind of contrasting in this really creepy way. Like putting joyful things within a creepy, grimy setting can make things even creepier, and it does that well enough on like the production design front. So, 2006 movie does have that going for it. But going into something we haven't really touched on yet that I would like to, and we may be heading towards the end of this. I don't know how long we've been going, but something that the 2019 movie has obviously been more criticized than these other two, and it does feel like a lot of that reason is probably it's not just the social commentary aspect of it, but how on the nose the social commentary might be and how thick they're laying it on. But here's the thing I want to say right up front is that people probably a certain amount of people probably went after the movie in general for just doing social commentary. Period. Like it didn't matter how well they did it. Just the fact that they went the social commentary route was probably pissing people off. And I'm not saying like everybody that said that were like the guys in the movie necessarily. But the perspective I'm looking at it from is, and it's kind of taking an approach that the following year Promising Young Woman would do a lot better. Where Promising Young Woman was kind of taking I guess you could say it's more of a drama, but it kind of took a thriller approach a little bit. And it kind of tackled this same sort of material, this similar material. And so to put it in this horror setting with the Black Christmas setup might seem totally random, but maybe not, because we talked about the phone calls in the original movie, and how it's clear what the killer is saying into the phone is derogatory stuff and really vulgar, vile stuff, specifically directed at women. So I don't think it's I don't think it's that out of nowhere that you could use Black Christmas as a jumping off point for a social commentary about the way women are treated as we got by the time we got to 2019 and what we were looking at, being 2 years out from the Me Too stuff. So looking at it that way, and that's another thing too, is you could say that another reason people hate the 2019 movie is how much it deviates from the original movie. I would say it's not inherently a bad thing if a remake deviates from what it is, if it's got something else to do on its own that's worthwhile. Like, remakes using original movies as a jumping off point to be their own thing, it can be really interesting and exciting and kind of new, to where it's like it's keeping the sort of base of the original movie and it's taking things from it and building on themes rather than maybe just, copying the story. And that could be interesting. I don't think the 2019 movie accomplishes that. I think that's what it's trying to do, and I do commend it for that. But like I said, it's got something to say on the social commentary. It's being a horror movie is where it kind of falls on its face. Like I said, they've got the Christmas atmosphere right. They've got the ideas in their social commentary. They've got what they want to do. And then it's almost like being a horror movie was really far down on the priority list, and that's where I feel like it falls apart. Um, and like I said, the fact that it just also feels chopped to shit. Where like it's trying to almost take out nearly every aspect of the horror movie. So it's taking out the kills. It's going down this path that, like I said, going down your own path is fine, but when you're already going against what actually made the original movie great as far as its ending goes, and creating something else entirely, where, like I said, we've already been down this path, supernatural route, etc. Everything feeling obvious, what was going to be revealed, all of that. But I don't know. I don't think it does feel like the original movie gave a setup for this misogynistic antagonist and kind of doing a look into it with that, and using it as like sort of this framing device. I will say, as far as it being too on the nose, another thing is that I wouldn't really hate a movie for shouting its message if it's really passionate about what it's portraying or what the intended. That's the thing, is I struggle to even say the word allegory because it's that telling you exactly what it's about. And I think the thing that also really drowns this out and makes it feel not that great is there is a horror movie. 2 years after this, there was a horror. No, the next year. Actually, Jesus Christ. Like 3 months, actually. Like 3 months later, there was another horror movie that came out. And it had this perfect allegory for traumatized women and women that were in abusive relationships and the trauma that comes with that and follows them. And that was Lee Winnell's Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. Which, the great thing about The Invisible Man is you can just look at it as a straightforward horror movie about this woman that escaped her abusive relationship. The boyfriend comes after her in this invisible suit that he's made, and she's paranoid because he's terrorizing her, because he's the antagonist in a horror movie. But then when you look at it, and it being this whole allegory for traumatized women, and once they've been in a situation like this, how the terror never goes away, and the paranoia never goes away, it feels like an entirely different movie. And it's maybe even more powerful because of its allegory. But the movie never blatantly tells you that that's what it's about. It just does its job as a horror movie, and like I said, you can basically look at it as two different movies. And with movies like Black Christmas that are shouting their message from the rooftops, which is fine, the power's not going to be the same. To kind of let the audience piece it together, I feel like is going to make the message of what you're trying to say hit a lot harder. And so when it hits them as a realization, it's like, oh damn. And then that's the power of it. And like I said, when they're telling you from the get-go what the movie's about, and it's like, this is what we're talking about, this is what the horror represents, the horror that's barely here and barely doing its job, yeah. It's not going to have the same impact, unfortunately. One more thing I was going to bring up about them about the social commentary in this was the idea of women and what they go through not being completely taken seriously, especially when they try to tell somebody about it being a problem. The way that's kind of set up in the original movie, where they go to the cops and the cops are very dismissive, and then the cops don't do anything in the original movie until Chris, the boyfriend, comes in and says, "Hey, do something." Then they do something. You can see where the original movie is a jumping off point for what's in the 2019 movie. Just like I said, for all the reasons we talked about, the 2019 movie kind of keeps missing its target. But the target is there. They had a target. They're just not hitting it. So that's kind of the issue. I think that's pretty much where I think we can leave this. So I think it goes without saying, like, I don't. If I were to ask to rank them, I don't really know what I would say. I just know that the first movie, obviously, might be one of the best horror movies ever. These other two have their problems. I'd take just because the 2006 movie is just so fucking unpleasant in not a fun way. I would take the 2019 movie over it, but I'm not really keen on rewatching either one. So I'm just gonna stick to the original like all the time. That's how I feel about these. So we only have a few things left for this month, and they're going to involve my brother, and I think there's another movie club. I'm kind of shooting these in advance, so I'm pretty sure. So it's going to be like 4 more videos in a movie club, I think. The movie club is in between. It's going to be 2 videos, the movie club, and 2 more videos, and those 4 videos that the movie club is between kind of all go together. So, yes. So I'm going to leave this at this. So I think that's it.